Thanks for joining me today. This is the Anonymous Author Podcast, and I'm your host, Anonymous the Author.
The author. The author. Spit flows, rip shows, a monster. Living this life how we ought to. We slick talk, pain and torture. The author.
Thanks for joining me on the first official episode of this podcast. Today we're going to be touching on a few topics. The theme is going to be Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance, and we will touch on that a little bit later. I'll be giving you guys an introduction on who I am and a kind of theme of the podcast and some things to look forward to. So stay tuned.
The author.
What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust over and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it simply explode? That is Harlem by Langston Hughes, one of my favorite poets, actually. I was going to say during that period, but that poem just sums up the kind of thing that I love to hear. It doesn't give you any kind of closure. It just furthers the conversation. And I love it. Shout out to Langston Hughes and his many poems. But for some reason, this Harlem just always stood out to me. I first heard it in I believe it was, I want to say maybe the 7th grade was the first time I ever heard of Langston Hughes, and I first heard this poem. I do think it's one of his more popular poems, and it's not a simple little poem where you could say, oh, well, this is the concept and this is what it means. The name of the poem is Harlem, and he just goes to talk about what is a dream deferred. Personally, I think that this is a conversation about Harlem. Not just Harlem, but the Harlem Renaissance and during that period, the innovation of the disenfranchised, because Harlem during this time period was majority African American owned. With majority African American people were living there, and they created their own economy and they created their own lifestyle, and they went through a whole rebirth, a whole renaissance. This is exactly why it was called a Harlem Renaissance. There were Black-owned businesses. It was just a booming time to be an African American entrepreneur and to live in these vibing and beautiful communities. And I think that this poem is saying that what happens to a dream deferred. The history of African Americans are that we were slaves and, we couldn't pursue our dreams. So I think this poem is saying, what happens when you lose your dreams? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And he just goes on to break it down. And then at the last line, he says, or does it explode? I think he's saying that regardless of the difficulties and the challenges, that when you see that difficulty or that challenge and you fight for it and you persevere through it, your dreams eventually, they come true. They explode. You might defer that dream, you might push it off, but eventually the power of it comes to light and it explodes. So I think that if that makes any sense to anyone out there, I think that's what he was talking about in this poem titled Harlem. Also, the book, A Raisin in the Sun, I believe by Maya Angelou. Oh, y'all are going to kill me. I know y'all are going to kill me. I believe it's by Maya Angelou. Or Alice Walker. I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all going to have to get me right on that one. Y'all going to have to get me right on that one. But definitely, I was not the only one that was impacted by this poem. It just leaves you with a question mark. It doesn't solve any problems. It just continues the conversation. It just adds to it. And on some level, I just think that is so poignant. I think that's so deep. Yeah.